There we go. Hi, welcome everyone to the observation deck. I am Captain Ron, and today I'm joined by Steve Bassett, Tracey Garbutt, and Alan B. Smith. I really appreciate you guys joining me today. This is going to be a lot of fun. We've got limited time, so I want to just kind of get to everybody more than once. So let's kind of jump right in. Let's start off with you, Steve. You've been at this an awfully long time. As of today, where do you sit with what's happening, and what do you think is who or what do you think is visiting us?
Okay, let's see. I'll give you a quick answer
Easy
to
one.
that. I personally have met most of the ETs, and we've talked about what I should be able to say or not say. They've got me on a couple of NDAs, but I'll try to work around those. Let me say this. Over the last 5 years, we've made extraordinary progress, unprecedented progress. For those that just got to the issue back in 2017, they think this is normal, meaning, oh yeah, this is how it's always been. Isn't it? So like, hey, why don't you do more? Well, how about this? Why about that? I get it. That's the way it works. That's the way life is. Okay. Could we have made all of this same amount of progress in a year as opposed to 5 years? Yeah, we could. But let me put it this way. Trying to change government policy, particularly when it's entrenched or national security, it's pretty much like trying to change a tire on your car with just your bare hands. Right? It's really difficult, but given enough time, you could probably do it. Now, if funding became available so you could buy a lug wrench and a jack, you could probably change it a lot sooner. One of the things I've learned in 26 years on this is that the entities, the number of entities, the size of entities that are willing to fund the political disclosure process are few. The number of people and entities that are willing to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars looking for signals from extraterrestrials in the sky are many. And while that doesn't make a damn bit of sense, and it's nuts, that's the way it is. And I kind of knew that getting in. So this process continues 5 years after the emergence of the TTSA. And that 5 years of progress has certainly opened a possibility to get this thing resolved. Except the world is big and large, and a lot of things happen. And whatever your plans are, whether it's starting a company or a family or trying to pursue an activist goal or anything else, including going to the store to buy groceries, the world is more than happy to dish up some really profound obstacles, like the worst pandemic in human history. All right. Nothing else is even close for those that are reading things about the fact that the whole thing is just being put on as a ruse. Worst pandemic in human history. All right. Secondly, probably the worst political stretch in the history of America, going all the way back to Washington. 7 years of absolute total chaos, toxic poison, and gangrenous activity on the part of our political leaders. And then, if that wasn't enough, the worst war in Europe since 1940s, with daily, regular, consistent articles and statements from officials in the US, Europe, and Russia about the imminent potential use of nuclear weapons. Nothing like that even happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we're supposed to resolve this issue anyway. Man, it's tough, right? But if you don't want to you don't like tough, you don't want to become a political activist, and you don't want to take on any issues directly engaging the most powerful government in the world. So I have some optimism and I have some pessimism, but assuming we don't have a nuclear war, assuming politics settles down, all right, it's possible. And given the fact that the issue over the last 7 years, 5 years greater than ever, has literally been embedded in the human mind through social media. In other words, how do you put it this way? The whole ET reality issue and the exopolitics issue has virtually ingrained itself now in the full social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. It's all over the place. It's being shared and podcast and whatever. It's never going to go away. For those of you that have ever said anything stupid on the internet or in a post, you probably know now it never goes away, ever. Okay? So that ensures that ultimately we prevail, because the government never had to face a situation like that. End Project Blue Book, get rid of NICAP, put out a few lies, and people will just not pay attention for another 20, 30 years. Yeah, no longer. Okay, so the moment things settle down, this issue comes back in the forefront. I believe that there are many politicians on the Hill that are ready for that, but they are not going to step out now. They're not going to hold hearings now, not in the middle of this grotesque situation. But if we can get through this time, if we can get beyond this latest miscue, okay, the untold slaughter of men, women, and children by a man with cancer and Parkinson's disease, lost his mind, being backed up by even people in our own country. If we can get past that without a tactical nuke being used in Ukraine, or some U.S. plane shot down, or whatever the else it could happen, that could escalate to DEFCON 3 and then 2 in this country. If we can get past that, I believe this issue will come back to life. We can get congressional hearings. Once those witnesses testify, the stage is set for the president to introduce the reality and the confirmation of the ET presence. And I'll end with this. For those who are really paying attention to war and drought and famine and other environmental issues, as well as the decay of democracies and politics, who think we haven't got a snowball's chance in hell barring a deus ex machina, you're right. We don't. The only way we're going to get out of this friggin' mess that we've spent a long time creating, that's now how would you say, the circumstances involving 8 billion people, is we need a massive change of state. We need a paradigm shift of untold magnitude. We need disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence. If we don't get it, we haven't got a snowball's chance in hell.
Wow.
Sorry for the mixed news.
Worries. No, listen, that's what you're here for, Steve. Tracey, you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we ask ourselves the question, why might they be here now? I think Steve just outlined a gigantic bunch of reasons why they would be looking at us now. And now I will qualify now as, maybe the last 50, 60 years, this 100-year packet, this timeline, perhaps, if they can, I assume that they have, they are, this is my own assumption, existing outside of time, my own assumption, but they would see what was coming in our timeline. And, I was thinking of all these other things I was going to say. And then when Steve was going through this, I'm like, yeah, here's the why right here. Here's the why they might be getting involved, because we are kind of coming to this, incredible crisis in every different facet you could imagine. So I just wanted to start by saying that as I was listening to Steve, I'm like, yeah, listen to this, listen to the state of where we are right now and where we're heading. So there's all of this, and then we have all of the things ahead of us that might interest them as well, such as, where we're heading with artificial intelligence, for example. That's a giant wild card. We don't know to what extent that is going to change everything. And when I say that, I mean, we know it's going to affect and change absolutely everything, because obviously the goal will be heading towards conscious AI. Some people believe in singularity, some people do not. But no matter what, we might not be able to tell the difference. We have all sorts of existential threats that are, everything from environmental to artificial intelligence. And then we also have us becoming a space-faring civilization not too far off in the future. I believe it. Elon Musk, I believe, if I don't have this wrong, his goal is to be colonizing Mars by 2050. And I haven't listened to this recently, but I know he had a large number of people he wanted to see colonizing Mars around that time. And so, I mean, we're going into their domain as well. So it's just another thing to add to the table of possibly why. I wasn't going to start with that, but Steve just really took me there.
Oh, that's fine. That's what we're here for. That's great. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's part of the whole explanation. Part of the whole exploration, because some people might argue we can argue over who they are, what they look like, but we may never know, because one thing we do know is that there's cognitive manipulation. I would say that is the number one thing that we probably know. So they could show themselves however they want. They have greater cognitive abilities than us. I think we can start there. I forget what I was going to say about that.
Well, clearly they're clandestine by choice. They could expose themselves immediately if they wanted to.
Yeah, they could. And I think sometimes they do. I think sometimes they do. But for the most part, no. I'm sorry. I totally lost my train of thought with what I was going to say with that.
That's okay, Tracey.
We'll come back. We'll come back to it.
Alan, real quick. Alan, you've been interviewing a lot of people that have discussed this topic. What are you feeling, and what's the consensus out there among the experts you've talked to?
Thank you so much again, Ron, for having me on here today with these amazing people. Steve has been on Paranormal Now recently, and what I love about Steve is he thinks big, and every time we have a conversation, or he has a conversation with anybody, there is that like tug back and forth between being optimistic and being realistic, and I think some people confuse being realistic with pessimism. I have a strange look on this. I think that because we're trying to talk about extraterrestrial existence, and how many alien species are there? I mean, do we really know? Rick Doty was on the show just recently, and he says he was told there are 11 species out there.
I've heard 82. I've heard 127. I've heard there's number. Everybody's got
57 too.
Right. And much of this is hearsay, and you can't really. It's not verifiable. But I think that it's still important that we go down these lines of investigation to try to start doing some record keeping. And then the more data that we have, if indeed we do make, obvious ET contact, maybe there's something in that data that we can refer to. So we can look at these aliens that we make contact with and start looking at some of these reports that abductees or contactees have had, and that might actually give us an advantage. So I would say don't just throw all of that out. Even though much of it is speculation, I think it's really important that we do consider it. And yeah, so I think that often we're faced with this question of, are we in an existential crisis? Are ETs here because of the Trinity test site, atomic explosions, and now we suddenly got their attention? And there's the fear that a human species or an intelligent species, we see this in science all the time, discussing how well a intelligent species can navigate the chaos of universe or just self-awareness in the first place. And just really, other than ourselves, we have no way to understand that. So there's this idea that we have to save ourselves before we extinguish ourselves. But it seems to me that it's built into the very human nature to self-preserve. And so the very idea that we're talking about this, that we're saying, be scared, be afraid, that's that self-preservation mechanism kicking in to help save us so that we don't self-extinguish. And if we assume that other intelligent life has that same capability, then that gives me hope that there aren't just a bunch of intelligent species popping up on planets all over the universe that just destroy themselves. I think that's an assumption that is based on nothing other than our own assumption on our own future, which we aren't even aware of yet. There are about 150 billion stars in the universe they're guesstimating born every year. That's crazy.
New ones?
New ones.
Jesus.
So it's about 400 million, I think. I'm sorry, I think it's 400 million per year, if I'm correct. And then there are a certain percentage of those that have habitable planets on there, right? So what are the odds that every single microorganism that evolves, reaches the state of intelligence, and then you have to extrapolate from there. How long can that intelligence survive? It's almost infinite, the number of organisms that can crop up in this universe and self-perpetuate. And I think that what we're seeing, and this ties into what Tracey is saying, is that some of these extraterrestrials, if you want to call them that, or better yet, I like exoconsciousness. I like that phrase, because there is this idea that they seem to be slipping in and out of reality as we understand it. And that would tie into what Tracey was saying about time. So of all the possibilities of all the different types of species that we can't even imagine that might exist, it seems to me that something is coming through and communicating with people here. Now, you can argue whether that's a 3D being, a nut, quote unquote, nuts and bolts being that came from, Sirius B, Zeta Reticuli, whatever it is, and just flew their craft over here, and they're visiting, and our Lear instruments are picking up these craft, and that's all it is. Or you can say maybe they are a far more complex and perhaps nearly incomprehensible consciousness that we don't understand. And if that's the case, sure, perhaps they can come into our 3D reality, appear as a UFO, a flying saucer, but then also kind of slip back into whatever dimension they came from. There is the parallel between close alien abduction cases and mystical and like religious experiences. Terrence McKenna, who's one of my favorite minds, bless his soul, has passed, but he makes a really good analogy when comparing the study of ufology and alien abductions to what he was studying, which was psychedelics and these weird experiences that people would have on psychedelics. And he said what the psychedelic had was repeatability. So you could smoke DMT, you can do ayahuasca, and say, wow, I saw these beings, these elf-like beings, or this serpent-like entity. And you can say to someone else, here, try this. And then they can have that experience as well. And there was, Rick Strassman did a study on this, of course. So you have repeatability with what I would call an exo-consciousness. There's something on the other side during that experience that psychonauts are seeing and experiencing. And I think that in ufology, that's where we want to get to. And I know I'm going kind of on the fringe here, but I'm very, very much comfortable with the paranormal, Steve, your favorite word. And that's where I live, because there clearly is an overlapping of these instances. So to get back to our ETs coming here, and how do we deal with that as from a study of ufology? I think that we need to find something like the DMT people have, some way to have a repeatability to make conscious contact with these things. Now, CE5, there's a lot of people that claim that works for them, and I think that perhaps if you can get enough repeatability, if you can, like meditation, if you can train people in a certain way to say, I can call down a UFO, like Prophet, what was his name? Ishmael?
There's several guys that can do that.
Yeah. That would be impressive. Because I know there are a couple of instances where he, on recorded news, called down a UFO, and it was this anomalous thing that came up through the sky, and that's caught on camera. You can look that up online. But how often do you get that repeatability? Very rare. So I think that's where we need to get to. If we can get to that place, then I think we'll know what questions to ask as far as what kind of species or consciousness we're dealing with here. But again, like all of this, it's like constantly slipping through your fingers.
Yeah.
Because you hear one report and then another report, and you're talking about really bizarre stuff, which I know there's probably a lot of people in UFO Twitter world who are like going like this, like, oh my God, can we just stick to the documents, please? And I get that. Like you need that study. You need that hardcore science. Like Mark D'Antonio often says, like you need someone to do that boring and hard work. But it doesn't mean you ignore everything else. In the early days of science, the study of geology, they didn't understand that had anything to do with fusion and star formations, relating to the geology here and the chemistry on Earth. They didn't understand that, but it doesn't mean that you don't study. You don't take those two studies and merge them together at some point. And so I think like often what's called paranormal may better be phrased like a fringe science. It's loose, it's speculative, but there's something there, and we need to take the time to look into it. Don't throw it out. If that's not your thing, that's fine. Let those of us who are interested in it study it, and then you focus on your thing, and let's compare notes, and then hopefully we'll arrive someday at like a unified field theory for all of this.
It's an excellent point that this is not a repeatable thing, and it's an unknown that we're studying. We have first-person accounts, but that only goes so far to most people. Steve, do you want to address what Alan was saying there?
No, I think he said it. He got into that zone and discussed it well. Let me go back to basics. The second half of your question. Oh, here are the basic questions. Who are they?
Right.
Where are they from? How did they get here? Why are they here? What are they doing to service why they are here? And what might we expect? Okay. Who are they? I have very high confidence that they are sentient beings who did not evolve on the planet Earth. They haven't been here all along, living in caves, hiding in mountains or whatever. They evolved somewhere else. Okay. How many species or types are there? I don't know. It only matters that there's one, right? One is enough. One extraterrestrial set of beings visiting us is enough. We don't need to confirm whether it's 1, 9, 20, 85, or 57 varieties to move forward and resolve this issue. We just need to know there's one here, okay? How did they get here? And where are they from? So obviously they're from outside the planet. No evidence that they're based in the solar system. So that means they're another star system. They got here through some sort of travel, which is more convenient than rockets. Our physics is already closing in on that explanation, so I feel good about that. Interstellar drive. Okay. Why are they here? All right. Again,
but Steve, you think physical, not interdimensional. You think it's still that they figured out the drives to get here.
Again, until you have real clear evidence and indications that something is outside of our dimensions, let's just stay within our dimensions. All right. This physics of interstellar travel that's emerging in our own physicists, including some rogue physicists out there that are really interesting, isn't really interdimensional. It kind of looks a little like it, but it probably is not. It's a workaround relativity. So interdimensionality and time travel and stuff is wonderful. It's fun. It makes for great movies and everything. But in terms of going there regarding this issue, we don't really, there's no basis to go there yet. And I can assure you going there doesn't help the political process. We don't want to be calling witnesses to sit before Marco Rubio and Mark Warner and the Intel Committee to talk about time travel possibilities. Let's hold that until the post-disclosure world. And so the why is interesting. I can't ask them why, all right? But we can judge the why on what their actions are. But let's step back about something else in terms of who they are, all right? Something that is not given a lot of attention in what I call the activist movement, but for good reason. But that doesn't mean it isn't there, and it doesn't mean I'm not paying very close attention. Some of the most important evidence we have, period, better than even the Nimitz case, is the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have privately conveyed their personal experiences with ETs coming into their bedrooms or elsewhere, engaging them and taking them places. Not one, Not 1,000, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Now, a major portion of those accounts were sent to Whitley and Ann Strieber. Ann read them all, reviewed them all, actually wrote a book, sort of compilation, talking about what she got, the general take from those hundreds of thousands of written cases submitted privately, no expectation of money or fame or anything else. Interestingly enough, tens of thousands of those written, I don't think emails were involved. I think email is a whole nother set of documents, but written on paper accounts sent to them were just delivered by Jordan Peace to the university, Rice University in Texas, which apparently felt it was worth having these hundreds of thousands. So that's where they are. Somebody, some fine reporter for the Washington Post could head on down to Texas and read, I don't know, 1,000 of them. And what that person would see is that within that larger context, there is a core amount of information which is so consistent, it simply cannot be denied, which includes the fact that many of these contactees are artists. They can draw and they can paint pretty well. And either from their own conscious memories or from memories derived through assistance with hypnosis and so forth, they have drawn the ETs, they have painted them. And so I am confident we actually know what they look like. And if you go on Google and put in extraterrestrial types, alien types, hit images, boom, they come up. Now, some little weird, focus on the ones that seem to be in that zone. There seems to be about 5 or 6 types. So we know what they look like because they have been drawn and painted by the people that have been in the same room with them. That's pretty good. Now you may say, okay, well, wow, that is powerful. So why isn't that front and center of all the action? Because what's going on now is not just science. John Mack tried to get in that area way back in 1990, 30 years before Avi Loeb turned up. He was actually interviewing contactees. He was going there, and Harvard tried to destroy him. Almost succeeded. He was able to do some more work, but then he was hit by a truck. It was an accident. And then Harvard went dead, silent, crickets, until Avi Loeb showed up. And now he's looking for signals in the sky, which means he's brought Harvard up to about 1958. But okay, I'll take whatever I can get. All right. So we kind of know what they look like. We know one of the things they're doing in terms of the why, because there are thousands of tens of thousands of reports of how they deal with the contactees. Movies have been made, narrative, fiction, nonfiction, right? The fiction tended to, how would you say, exaggerate a little bit. but overall, particularly in the nonfiction, you get a sense of what they're doing. It's pretty significant. And it involves an enormous amount of what we'd like to call genetic work. So we know about that, but we can't emphasize it right now. So why am I saying it right now? Well, because I say emphasize. I mean, we can't make it the forefront of the movement, but we can't ignore it. And the contactees like to be reminded that they exist and that they matter and their evidence is important, right? Because they've been treated like other people and forced to live in a closet since the 1940s. And I never liked that as an activist, okay? What else are they doing? Well, there's something else they're doing, which from the political standpoint, from the immediate standpoint, particularly as it pertains to what's going on in the world right now, and I can't overemphasize this enough, they turn off our nuclear weapons. Not once, not twice, but numerous times. They've turned off Soviet nuclear weapons, Russian nuclear weapons. They've turned them on, meaning they put them into launch mode. And you may say, well, that's pretty intense. I mean, that should be like big time investigations and articles and hearings on the Hill. No, because that is way too intense, way too serious. And so the US government, the Air Force, the DOD, and everybody else pretended all of the scores of witnesses to this never existed. This is all they could do. They couldn't kill them. They couldn't undermine them, destroy them on the internet. They just had to pretend they didn't exist. Bob Salas just doesn't exist, right? So I don't know what you're talking about. Now that gives you a sense of how kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Somewhat insidious this has gotten when SAC-based, highly secured, top-of-the-line officers who have direct personal testimony of the witnesses being shut down while craft are over their sites are pretended to be non-existent because it's inconvenient for the government. but it's not inconvenient for us. And so one of the things you're seeing happen is the testimony of these witnesses is slowly making its way. And in the last year, it's starting to turn up in articles. It's starting to turn up in some DOD stuff. They're slowly getting to the point where, yeah, the DOD is finally going to admit that in addition to those definitely real things that are flying around the Nimitz craft, there were some definitely real things flying around some of our SAC-based nuclear facilities. And coincidentally, all of the missiles shut off. So let's look at that. Let's study that, right, and see what we've got. All right. That why, that action behind the why is the most important thing we have got to focus on. Everything else, hybrid children, taking sperm, whatever the hell they're doing with genetics, that's cool. It's interesting. I'd like to know the science, but it's trivial compared to why are they turning our nuclear weapons off? What would they do if we started a nuclear war? What would they do if we did not start a war, but started to get rid of nuclear weapons? What would they do if, in fact, we disclose the ET presence, right? Would open contact take place after that? I've talked about this at length, so I won't go into it. These are some pretty important whats and whys that get to their whys. So that's how I tend to look at it. I try not to get into too many speculations about the whats and the whys and the whos and the wheres and so forth. They could be coming from the future. They could be coming from the middle of the earth. They could be coming in other dimensions. But for now, I'm more than happy that they come from another planet and another star system. And they've been watching us for thousands of years. And now we've got nuclear weapons. We've used them. We've killed our own people with them. We've built thousands more. And somehow that has very much to do with why 2 years after we slaughtered some people in Japan, and by slaughter, I mean we killed some of them immediately and the rest suffered unbelievably until they died. Suddenly they're turning up all over the damn world. One crashes in Roswell, and then 10 years, 20 years later, they're turning off our nuclear weapons. That's a real why that I want people to focus on, particularly.
Totally. And Steve, the post-disclosure world, as you call it, you know, that's when we can worry about these details of what kind of crafts they are, what kind of, where they're coming from and all that. Let's just get to the
There is a huge volume of stuff that we will be able to get to in the post-disclosure world after confirmation has come from the heads of state. And the reason it's kind of a problem is that there's a lot of people that want to get to it now. We want to know all of it now. And the government loves that. Okay, look, you don't have the money, you don't have the labs, you don't have the resources, and a lot of it we already know. But hey, take the next 20 years trying to figure it all out.
That's a problem in this community, fighting against each other about all these little tiny minute details that don't matter.
Because then the truth embargo gets to go on, right? In other words, you can study it and read. By the way, the ET presence has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt for 60 years. But if we want to keep reproving it over and over and over and over and over again and arguing about every aspect, that's fine with them. Take all the time you need. Take at least as long until I don't have to answer any hard questions in front of the press when the president finally says, yeah, they've been here all along, right? And some think you should never know. Take the end of time. You can't handle it. You don't have a right to know. It's purely our prerogative as supreme human beings working in the national security states of Russia and the United States and so forth, which is a sense of arrogance and hubris, which really it's hard to measure, but that's how some of them operate. But it's changing. They're losing ground. We're moving forward. So ultimately, we will get disclosure. And I invite people to enjoy investigating every aspect of this, but understand, if you really want to see the answers to your myriads of questions, help us get the money to get the president in the hearings to confirm the ET presence so we can move on with civilization in our lifetime.
Let's get to that first. I agree. That's a great point, Steve. Tracey, you had a front row seat to this Rice University with Jeffrey Kripal delivering from Jordan Pease. You want to shed some light on him?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I was just there. And I was going through Ann Strieber's letters, as were the people I was with. Yeah, I was with Lori and Jordan, Lori Wagner, Jordan Pease. And, you know, there were all sorts of files that were fascinating, and I couldn't get to them all. There's a big collection from Ed Dames. There's Richard Haynes. I mean, there is incredible information there. If people ever want to go and check it out, you just have to book ahead. But looking at Ann Strieber's letters was really an incredible experience, you know, because again, like Steve said, we're not talking about emails. We're looking at handwritten letters from people. So you see all this different handwriting. You see pages and pages. You see pictures of the sometimes of the people. You see drawings from these people. You see these commonalities in this desperation, because their whole world paradigm has been completely shattered. And in many cases, it's not just the person who's writing. They're also talking about their family members who don't really want to talk about it. But what you're seeing is trauma a lot of the time. You know, you're seeing this. They don't have anyone or anything to cling on to. They're looking for understanding. And it's true, like Steve was saying, they're kind of hiding in, you know, nobody understands what's going on with them. They didn't have, especially back then, they didn't really have anyone to talk to. So you would see this letter after letter after letter. These incredible stories. But what always really stands out to me is the psychological process that these people have gone through to actually reach out to Anne and Whitley. You know, you can really hear this in what they're writing. It took them a lot. They've been dealing with so much with no support anywhere. And then to actually be able to write this to somebody, these, you know, paradigm shattering, reality shattering experiences that sound absolutely crazy. They, you read the pain that they are experiencing in their life, and it really affects you. But also, like I was saying, every letter looks completely different. Some are, you know, teeny tiny little pages like this with Scotty dogs on them. You know, they're writing, and then you see these big sort of, you know, script written letters, but every one of them is so many pages, and you've got all different ages. I was reading some from 19 and 20-year-olds saying they did not know what to do. You know, they'd had these experiences and they had nobody to talk to.
And they have nothing to gain by sending this letter. It's not like they're seeking fortune or whatever.
Right. And most of the time they don't want anybody to know. You know, so people always have that argument, oh, people are just looking for attention, or they're, you know, whatever. That's BS, because these people, most of the time, it's very clear they want to be anonymous, but they want understanding, and they really want validation, you know, because they're a part of their, it would seem a part of their life, a part of their psyche is stuck there. You know, a part of them is having a hard time moving forward. And you see that too. And until they find some sort of way to reconcile this psychologically, sociologically, spiritually, they're kind of stuck. And it's heartbreaking to go through these letters, you know, and just when you think you have a pile this big, there's another box and another box and another box. And you start to see the drawings. The drawings are so crystal clear. Like, I bring up the cognitive manipulation because I always feel that that is a variable that is hard to control for and that we need to mention. However, it's true what Steve said. You know, the drawings are crystal clear. It's not, you know, for a lot of them, it's not... It's clear, like they saw these beings in this particular way, and sure, maybe they do look like something else, but these were the experiences these people had. And some people will think, okay, well, you know, I hear they happen in dreams. Well, no, they don't always happen in dreams, and I don't want to discount that realm either. A lot of these people are having daytime visitations. Some are having nighttime visitations. Some are having etheric, you know, visitations, and we can't quite separate that, but it's coming in all sorts of realms. You know, we've got conscious, etheric, possibly interdimensional, possibly, like, I don't know. I personally try to look at this because I don't feel we can control for all the variables. But I try to just have an open mind to more and more information that's coming. I myself have started going into abduction research and doing qualitative interviews with abductees now firsthand. And this is really an amazing process. I'm learning so much, but it is clear, again, like Steve said, there are patterns that we already know about. And as you read more of these letters, they do fit into these categories very nicely. That those categories are there. Then we have a lot of fringe and outliers and all sorts of other realms of things. But there are definite categories of experiences that are happening. And it's clear it's been going on for a long time. So these I highly recommend if anyone ever gets a chance. And you really, if you're on the fence about this, this is a good place to go visit and pull out those letters. I mean, you can always read Anne Strieber's book, which is the Communion Letters, but it's a different experience to see them firsthand and read them and read about their experiences and their children and their families and how they haven't been able to cope with this, changing everything in their life. I mean, it shatters their ideas sometimes about religion, sometimes not. Sometimes it deepens their experience with religion. It changes their viewpoint on spirituality. But it is affecting them to their core. And we cannot deny that part. There is something actually happening to them. You can see it when you read these yourself. That's all I want to say about that.
Tracey, you're looking at that one collection. Then you have the Heineck collection in Chicago. You've got Klaus in Switzerland. You've got all of these researchers that have collected stuff over the years. Dr. Jacobs, he's got thousands of volumes. So there's all of these things. Steve, I think you want to jump in there. Do you have something?
Boy, first of all, Ron, I don't know if you know what's happening here, but this is one of the very, very, very few instances in which someone on any podcast, and I've seen a zillion of them, has spoken directly about these letters and actually reading them. This just doesn't happen. Right? I think Anne did it on Unknown Country perhaps a few times. Outside of that, no one has seen them. She's read them, and you just that is a very rare thing. This is very, very special. All right.
Agreed.
And oh my Lord, there's so much I could say. Look, let me tell you a story. If you go back, the early people like Bud Hopkins and so forth, the tremendous work they did. All right. But it was Whitley Strieber that exploded the contact issue into the world. All right. This is an extraordinary thing that he did. His book, Communion, first, he's a brilliant writer, so he has a way of conveying these things in a powerful way. But he writes Communion. He's a best-selling author to begin with. There used to be bookstores back then, you may recall. And so he puts the bestseller out, Communion, and of course it's selling like crazy. And every bookstore in the country is stacking them up in the storefront windows. And so people are walking by and they're seeing the Communion book. And guess what? It's got a picture of a gray on it, doesn't it? Okay. And it's triggering memories, particularly in women. They're going by, boom. Suddenly things are coming back and it emerges. He brings an issue that was known into the full public domain, and it's never stopped since, okay? But let's go a little bit further. Here's something else it did. John Mack did not want to get into this issue. He was bumped about it a couple of times, but he's got a full plate and plenty of projects. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He didn't want to touch it, but they kept bumping him. Finally, he said, look, I'll go down to New York and I'll talk to Bud Hopkins. See what he has to say. He goes down and he goes to his studio there, and they're sitting talking about it. And John is trying to think, gee, I don't know if I get in this or not. And at some point, Bud says, look, John, I get thousands of letters, okay? And I can't read them all, so I put them in his closet over here. So if you'll go to the closet, grab 6 or 7 at random. They're unopened, right? Open them and read them. So John goes to the closet. He holds this big pile. He grabs 6 of them, goes on, sits on the couch, and he starts reading them. Within 4 of these, he's already committed. Yeah, I'm going to get into this field. I'm going back to Cambridge. I'm going to set up an institution. It's going to be called the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research, and I'm going to get into this field as long as I can until Harvard tries to stop me. So that is just one way, those letters. By the way, Joe Montaldo also has a massive amount of letters, okay? And so, but it gets more interesting because guess what? The number of contactees is in the millions worldwide. And that means there have been plenty of contactees in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Department of Defense and the CIA for a long time. And guess what? The government knew about them, found some of them, and have been working with their inside contactees for a very long time. Very convenient, by the way. Total non-disclosure, national security, never going to say anything. And they're learning about this phenomena inside in secrecy, while acknowledging it doesn't exist. And guess what? We've reached a point where some of the people inside who are contactees are actually starting to come forward and say, I'm a contactee. And so when a 30-year career intelligence officer like Jim Semivan comes public and says, I'm a contactee, draw a line from that all the way back to the very first Bud Hopkins book. And then, of course, to Strieber's book. It's a long line, a lot of years. Why does it take so goddamn long? Because the issue is so profound. Its implications so extraordinary, and the problems it poses, even for a democratic national security state, are enormous. And so undoing and getting where we need to go has been tough. But let me assure you that military witnesses will be the key to the hearings that are coming that will lead to disclosure. And once that confirmation is out, the last people in the closet that I am aware of, because just about everybody else is out of the closet, frankly, but the last people of substantial numbers that are still in the closet are contactees. And after disclosure, they are coming out of the closet, and they are going to have a chance to speak their truth. They will go speak in front of Congress. They will talk to researchers. They will be interviewed by journalists. And finally, we will hear what they have to say. And when they wrote those letters to Montaldo, Jacobs, to Strieber, private, fundamentally what they were doing is saying this: I can't go public. I can't talk to my friends, but I can put this on record. One day somebody will read this, okay, and they will know my story. And those are the people that I think about when I do this work.
Absolutely. And there's also think about all the countless ones who never did write it down and never did send in that letter. There's those two. Okay, we've gone over the time here. Thank you guys so much, Steve, Tracey, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thank
Sorry
you
your mic's not working. No, really, really great stuff. Really appreciate it. Very short time, but very good content.
Right.
Thanks. Go put your avatars on and watch this next panel. These guys are pretty good too.